but it gets hard. And so you have to think about these things. The husband did not think, I'm not ever going to live long enough to pay off this debt. I'm sure it never crossed his mind, Brother Jay. Again, like I said, he had young boys. You don't feel like you're going to die at 40. We'll just make up a number. You don't feel like you're going to die at 40. You're not supposed to die at 40. You're supposed to die at an old age. But that's not always the case. It's not always the case. And so what have you done? What have you done that if something happened to you, your wife and your kids will have to deal with when you're gone? What provision have you made so that if something does happen to you, your wife and your kids are taken care of once you're gone? And it's funny because it's kind of a balancing act. When you're young, like Cody and Justin back there, when you're young like those guys, there's a lot more they got to be taken care of. Because you got a wife, you got kids at home. But as you get older, there's less and less, generally your house is going to be already paid off and your vehicle's paid off, and there's just not as much responsibility. You just have to make sure that, that there's food on the table and she can go to Golden Corral and go to Hamrick's once a week. As long as you got that stuff, then they're taken care of. But I mean, we've got we've got Katie in here who's been a widow for a while, and you've got Miss Jimmy and my mother-in-law. That I'm sure those thoughts run through your mind whenever your husband passed away. How am I gonna take care of myself? How am I gonna do this? Well, part of the reason is just because they'd never done it before. It was always just taken care of for them. And we understand that God has the ability to take care of them. He does. But as a man, it's our responsibility, with God's help, to make sure that we leave them in a situation that they're going to be taken care of. And so the husband right here did not think about that. Again, like I said, he was the servant to the man of God. Could he have not just went to him and said, hey, look, I need some help here. I just need some fatherly advice. That's kind of how Elisha was to those sons of the prophets. They call, they're like, my father, my father. Just some fatherly advice. Here's where I'm at. Here's the situation that I found myself in. And he could have gave him some advice. He could have just as easily told him to go borrow a bunch of vessels. He could have just as easily told him. Why couldn't he? I'll tell you why he couldn't, because he never came. He never came, he never asked. He tried to handle it on his own. And I wrote it down this way. I wrote it down this way. And the next person we're going to look at is the creditor. He made a deal with the devil, Cody. The creditor doesn't care. He does not care. It's not, I remember when we bought our house, the lady, when we bought our house, was really excited. We built our house. But when we got the loan, she was really excited that we got approved for our loan and that we were going to get a house. She was really excited for us. But most of the time, Chris, I'm just a credit score. I'm just a credit score. Are you putting up any collateral? And what are we getting if you don't pay your loan? They just have a job to do. They just have a job to do, all right? And they have a job to do. They have to do so many loans. They have to do so many loans a month. They have to justify their salary, so they have to do so many loans. And so they look at people, and they look at their credit score, and they're like, hey, I'll give you this loan. I got a guy that I know, and he ended up getting a divorce, and his wife in the divorce settlement was supposed to pay the payment on the vehicle. She didn't pay the payment on the vehicle. It destroyed his credit along with her credit, and so he needed a car. He needed a car. So he went to, those guys at CarMax, they really care about you. They do. They care about you. And I probably shouldn't have said the name, but anyway. But so anyway, he went to this place. He went there, and they have nice cars. They have nice cars, and they went there, and they were very helpful. They were very helpful, Cody. Instead of saying, look, do you really need a car? Do you really need one? I mean, you sound like you got your company vehicle, and you got this vehicle, and you got that vehicle. Do you really need a car? That's not what they said, Brother Jay. They're like, sure, come here, sit down. Let me see what we can get you approved for. Let me see what we can get you approved for. And once we know what we can get you approved for, then we'll go out on the lot and see if we can spend all that money. And so they got him approved. They got him approved. So if y'all know anything, if you're paying attention to interest rates right now around 4%, 3.5%, depending on what loan you get. If you're getting a mortgage on your house, it was down in the 2s. If you did a big mortgage on your house, it was in the 2s. So Cody bought a $20,000 car that a person with good credit would have paid 4% interest. So on a 5-year note, you know how much interest you pay on a 5-year note, 4% interest on $20,000? About $2,100. But those guys at CarMax, they really cared about him, and they really wanted him to have that car, so they gave him 18% interest. Do you know how much interest you pay in 5 years on a car if you pay 18% interest for the exact same $20,000 car? $10,470. A difference of $8,000. The creditor, they don't care. They'll finance you. They'll be glad to finance you because they know you're going to pay. And if you have trouble paying, that's even better for them because they charge more interest. They make more money. And if you don't pay, they just come get the car. And they know if they come get the car and you had a $20,000 car that was probably really only a $15,000 car that they sold for $20,000, then that you financed all $20,000 because you didn't have any money to put down for the car. They know that if they come get the car and then they resell the car and they only get $10,000 out of the car, but you still owe $20,000 on the car, guess what? They're going to sue you and win a judgment against you for the other $10,000. They got you coming and going. They don't care. And so, again, this husband went and made a deal with the creditor. And so, I don't know. I don't know anyone's story in here, but we all know people who have had their vehicles repossessed. I would assume everyone in here, whether they show up to work, with the tow truck. One night, Jason, the guy showed up at my house, and he had his little badge. He had his little badge right there. Had a pistol on his side. His buddy was standing there. And he was lost because GPS does not know what to do down our road. They do not know. If you punch in my address, if you punch in 1540, you're going to end up down there around Corinth somewhere. You're not going to end up at my house. And so we have people show up all the time. People just come up and be like, hey, can you please help me? I don't know where. And a lot of times, Jay, it's the repo man, and he's driving up and down the road. You see him driving up and down the road, and they're just looking for the car now because the GPS has got them all messed up. And so the repo man, he don't care. He don't care if you got 3 car seats in your vehicle. He don't care if you left your purse in the vehicle. He's going to come. He's going to hook to that thing. He doesn't care that you got to go to work the next morning. And if you don't go to work, you're not going to be able to pay your bills. If you don't pay your bills, not only are you going to lose your car, you're going to lose your house. It doesn't bother them. They go to sleep every night, and it does not bother them that this guy had a wife and 2 kids. This creditor, it did not bother him one single bit that this man passed away, and the first time they were late on their payment, he was happy. He was happy. Why? Here comes our husband here in this story. Here comes our husband in this story, Brother Jay, and he shows up and he says, hey, I need to borrow some money. All right, what do you got? Well, she tells you, and we'll get to it in a few, she tells you, I don't have anything. But the creditor's like, what do you got? Well, I got 2 boys. I got 2 boys. That's who he was sacrificing, Chris. Because that creditor, he didn't come and say, hey, I want your house. He come and said, I want your boys. They don't care. They're not your friends. This creditor was not her friend. This creditor was eager to loan the money, but he was also eager to repossess what she had the moment they didn't pay. And they're not loaning money for free. I know interest rates are super low right now, but they're not loaning money for free. They're making money. They're making money somewhere. He was going to make money, whether it was the interest he was getting from them, or he looked at them 2 boys and he's like, I tell you what, I could use them boys right there. Had the husband known it was going to come to that, do you think he would have made the deal? Had he known that when I signed my name to borrow whatever he borrowed, we don't know what he borrowed, whatever he borrowed, and whatever he borrowed it for, it couldn't have been much because they don't have anything. Whenever he signed that note, had he known that creditor one day was going to walk in and say, give me your 2 sons. You owe me money. You know you owe me money. If I take you to court, they're going to pass judgment and say, yes, you owe the money. And so you owe it to me. I want your 2 sons. The creditor does not care. He doesn't care. And so now we get to the place where the woman is involved. And again, I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us whether or not she was the reason why the loan had to be taken out. The Bible doesn't tell us. But she comes to another creditor. No. She goes and tells the other wives of the sons of the prophets. No. She goes and seeks out a new husband as quick as she can and says, hey, I got this debt I need paid off, so I'll go ahead and just marry you real fast so that you can pay my debt off. She didn't do any of that. She went, and in verse number 1, it says, now there cried a certain woman. I mean, she was passionate about it, Brother Jay. She was passionate about it. She was passionate about it that, hey, this is my problem now. She didn't try and get out from under it. She didn't try and run from the responsibility of it. Why? Because that creditor was going to take her sons. And she didn't want her sons taken. And she's like, hey, I need help here. And she went to the person who could help. She went to that man of God. Now, again, her husband was a servant to Elisha. He was one of the sons of the prophets. Surely to goodness they knew the story of Elijah and that widow woman, and he showed up at her house that day and said, hey, what are you doing? I got a little meal over here. I'm gonna make us a cake, and me and my son are gonna eat it, and then we're gonna die. And he's like, no, make one for me first. Maybe she knew that story, Brother Jay. Maybe she knew that story, and she's like, well, if it worked back then, maybe God can do something for me. Maybe she didn't know, but hey, I'm going to go to him. If anybody can help me, Elisha can help me. And so the woman, she comes, and you got to think about this also. She had to be devastated. Her husband had just passed away. Her husband, who was a young man, he was in his old age, and it was just time. No, her husband was a young man. And a young man, when you get married, you don't think, hey, I'm only going to be married for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You think, I'm going to be married for 40, 50, 60 years. And then one of us is going to pass away. But she was not of that age. She had young sons young enough to still be at home. And so she had to be devastated because, here she's got this whole life planned out and everything's going good. Hey, and we're serving God. Bad things don't happen to good people. Bad things don't happen to good people. I'm serving God. My husband was serving God. He was doing right. Bad things do happen to good people. It happens. And can you recover when it happens to you? Can you get up and go on when it happens to you? She could have just as easily said, well, God let my husband die. What's he going to do for me? She could have easily said that. God let this happen. So, why would I go back to a man of God and say, hey, help me? God, my husband would have been closer to this man of God than I'm ever going to be. And he died. And now I'm stuck in this mess. Where was God in all this? She could have easily said that. But that's not what she said. She went and cried to him and said, hey, look, maybe you didn't know, but I need you to understand that, hey, the creditor has come, and he said, if I don't pay, he's taking my 2 sons. And so when you look in verse number 2, it says, Elisha said unto her, what shall I do for thee? Now you can read that multiple ways. You can read that, how it's not written, and say, what do you want me to do about it? You could read it that way. What shall I do for thee? Or you can read it how it's written. What shall I do for thee? How can I help you? How can I help you? That's how it was written. That's the thing about Elisha. He was rough. The previous chapter, again, we looked at it last week. The previous chapter, when he talked to Jehoram, he was rough with Jehoram. He talked to him like he was a dog. But here's this woman, and she comes to him, and Brother Jay, as a man of God, he had compassion. He didn't say, woman, I'm too busy. I don't have time to deal with this. What do you want me to do? I don't have any money. Do you see what I got going on in my life? I don't have any money. What do you think I'm going to be able to do? Do you want me to just go talk to the guy and say, hey, can you float her alone for an extra 180 days until she gets on her feet? That's not what he said, Jason. He said, what shall I do for thee? And I love, again, Elisha because he thought on the fly and stuff that never happened before. He just like, oh, we're going to do it this way. So he says, what shall I do for thee? Tell me, what do you have? What hast thou in the house? And so look at what she says. Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house. Again, it's a shame. It's a shame to be in debt up to your eyeballs. It's a shame to be in debt that you're about to lose your children. And she's like, I don't have anything. She said, I don't have anything. It sounds like he's like, well, what can we sell here? What do you have? What do you have? I would have been like, well, what did you borrow the money for? You got the 2020, the 2021 Ford Bronco. My boy was talking about the Bronco this morning. You got the 2021 Ford Bronco sitting in your driveway. What do you got? She's like, nothing. I got nothing to sell. I got nothing to get rid of. I can't go on Facebook Marketplace and say, hey, I got this junk that I want to get rid of. Who wants my junk? Buy my junk. Can't go on Craigslist and say, hey, look, I got this I got this used Yamaha Warrior four-wheeler that's gently used. Isn't that right, Bub? Gently used Yamaha Warrior four-wheeler with just a little bit of steel, fake steel stuff added to the case because the case got broke and you couldn't weld to it. It's gently used, Brother Jay. But it's good junk. Buy my junk. Get me out of debt. I have a family member. My sister and mom watch this, so they'll get a chuckle out of this. I have a family member that she's never learned this, and so honest to goodness, she goes and pays retail for something, and within 2 weeks, she's selling it for half of what she paid for it because she owes the money to somebody. I mean, it's the craziest thing, and she's in her mid-30s, and she's never going to learn. But Brother Tyrone, it's the craziest thing in the world. She'll go spend $100 for something, and 2 weeks later, she's selling it on Facebook Marketplace for $50. And you're like, if you just kept that $100 bill in your pocket, whenever you owed someone $50, you could just give them $50 and you still have $50. But when you go spend $100 on this piece of junk that you really think you want, and 2 weeks later it's not worth it, it's not that important to you anymore, then you got to sell it for half of what you paid for it to pay off whoever you owe money to. It's crazy. It's crazy. But here Elisha says, hey, he said, what do you have? And she said, I don't have anything. Save a pot of oil. That's all I got. That's all I got. I got one pot of oil. And so here this husband passed away, and he left her with a house full of groceries and a bunch of money buried under the front porch steps. No. He left her with nothing but a bunch of debt and nothing to show for it. And so Elisha says, then he said, go, borrow thee vessels abroad. Again, like I said, I love Elisha because it's like, bam, just comes to him. Pow, got it. He's like, go, borrow thee vessels abroad. Borrow of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. So he told her, he said, look, here's what I want you to do. And I stopped in the middle of a sentence, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to go borrow vessels. I want you to go to everyone you know. You don't have to tell them everything that's going on, but I want you to go to them. Don't give them a sob story. Just go to them and say, hey, look, do you have empty vessels? I need your empty vessels. And he said, borrow not a few. Cody, he didn't just say, do you have one? He said, borrow as many as you can. Borrow those vessels. Why borrow the vessels? Because Elisha knew when she got done with the vessels, she could always take the vessels back to the person and not owe them anything. And so he said, borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and thou shalt pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. So, in my mind, again, you read this, and in my mind, you see her, she goes, and she's like, boys, I need y'all to get your little red wagons. What? I need you to get your little red wagons. We got something we got to do. And she just starts going all through the town where she lives, up and down the street, knocking on the door. It's the widow woman. What do you need? Oh, great. Probably wanting a handout. No, I just need to borrow something for just a little while. I just need to borrow something for a little while. What do you need? I need a pot. You got a pot? You got a kettle? Just whatever you got, I just need to borrow it for a little while. You having a big meal? Well, not exactly, but can I borrow it? Sure, here. Not using it right now. And they did exactly what the man of God said. Again, like I said, how many times does God write the prescription and you want to argue with God? God, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to do it that way. I am not going to do it that way. Well, you ask God, why don't you just trust him all the way? Why don't you trust him all the way? And so it says, so she went in from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. So I thought about this, Brother Jay. I thought about this. And so she poured out. Now you got to think, she's just got this little thing of oil. That's all she's got. She's got this little thing of oil. Now, here's where she had to have faith. So, when it was time to pour out, so everyone can see, when it was time to pour out, Brother Jay, do you think that she said, well, this is the same size as that, I'm just going to start pouring into that? Or do you think she said, you know what, boys, we've already committed now. We've already borrowed all the vessels now. We shut the door so no one can see us. They have no idea what's going to happen. Boys, I think we're just going to trust God. So she gets the big vessel out. She gets the big vessel out, and she takes the little vessel, and she says, here goes nothing, and she starts to pour. And she starts to pour, and she starts to pour, and she keeps pouring, and she keeps pouring, and she pours some more, and she pours some more, and she says, wait a second. The big vessel's full, but the little vessel is still full too. Move this one out of the way. Hand me another vessel. And she poured, and she poured, and she poured, and she poured some more, and she poured some more, Brother Jay, until it just got to where it was fun. It just got to where it was just what she did. It was just like, hand me a vessel. Keep pouring. All right, here, son number 2, you take the vessel. Son number 1, you hand me a clean vessel. You hand me an empty vessel. And so, boom, they had this little thing going. And you know how it is. I worked up at Chapco with Brother Jay, and you know how it is. The first day on the job, when you're putting glue in a bucket, I mean, you're having a terrible time. You're trying to get the empty bucket out. You're trying to get the bucket under the thing. Then you're trying to get the lid on it, get the lid set down on it, slid out of the way, and stacked up on the thing. But after you've done it for a few days, Brother Cody, I mean, next thing you know, like the batch maker can't keep up with you because you've already emptied the batch and you're standing down there with your arms like this, and you're like, come on. And so here she was, she's pouring, and she's pouring, and she's pouring, and she's pouring, and they just keep handing vessels and handing vessels and handing vessels until she gets to the point she's like, all right, boys, I still got some, give me a vessel. And her son's like, oh, we got a problem. What's the problem? We're out of vessels. What? And she looks around, and the story was funny. Our nephew come over to the house, and he works on RVs, and he said he went to work on this RV up in Chattanooga the other week, and when he went to work on this RV in Chattanooga, the guy wasn't there. He was down in Brunswick, and they told him where the key was, so he went in, Brother Jay. He said there's all kinds of just cups and pitchers and just there, but every one of them's full of water. And he's looking around, he's like, I can't figure out why all these are full of water. And so he does what he needs to, and he comes back a few days later, and he works on something electrical. Then the guy calls him and says, hey, I don't have any water. Well, what happened was the guy he was working for had left the water on when he went to Brunswick, and it got real cold and it froze, and the faucet had exploded, and it was just spraying water all over the stupid travel trailer. And so everything that had a container that would accept water was full of water. They were all full of water. And so that's when I got to thinking about that, I thought about this woman, and can you imagine what her house looked like? Because she went and borrowed these vessels, and she borrowed not a few, she borrowed a bunch, and there's just pots of oil sitting everywhere, Cody. There's just pots of oil here and a pot of oil there and another pot there, here a pot, there a pot, everywhere pot. There's just pots of oil everywhere. And she looks around, she says, my goodness, that didn't even seem like work. Look what we got, boys. And it's funny, Brother Jay, because she only did what she had instructions for. She had all these pots of oil, and she had to go back to the man of God and say, what do I do now? What do I do now? Why? Because she was a wife that was fully dependent on her husband, and she was not a businesswoman. She was not a woman that said, I know what we're going to do. I mean, the next lady kind of was. The next lady we're going to look at, she knew her own mind. But this woman's like, well, what do I do now? I got no idea what to do with it now. And so it says in verse verse number 6, and it came to pass when the vessels were full that she said unto her son, bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, there's not a vessel more. And the old state, then she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil. He said, look, all right, God's provided for you. Now go sell your oil. And he said, what did he tell her to do next? Go get you a timeshare? Go buy you a new car? Go buy you a bigger house because you got a lot of oil and you're going to make a lot of money? No. He said, go. And he said, go, sell the oil and pay thy debt. He said, go pay your debt. Go get this man off of you and tell this man, really appreciate what you did for my husband, but I'm making you a promise today. You'll never see my face again. I'll never borrow from you ever again. Glad to see you, but I don't want to see you ever again. And by the way, next time you look at my two sons, think what could have been, because they're not ever going to be working for you either. Again, the creditor, he didn't care. He got his money, he's got to go away. He said, go. He said, pay thy debt and live thou and thy children of the rest. God provided not only for the debt that she had, but he provided for her future and their future. Why? Because she went to the man of God. The man of God had compassion, and God chose this little woman to do a miracle for this little woman. It doesn't say she was special. You know why she was special? Because she believed God. You had to, when she took that pot, when she went and borrowed those vessels, and then she started filling those vessels, that was an act of faith. That was an act of faith. And God said, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. I see who you're trusting in, and I'm going to bless you because of it. Thank you.